Hey friends, it's Robin. Welcome back to my channel. Today we are doing another round of recent reads. We are finally catching back up on recent reads, so I have 10 more books to talk about. A lot of these were supposed to be vlogged in the month of October. In fact, I think almost every single book on this list was supposed to be in a vlog. That never ended up happening. I think you'll kind of see why it didn't end up happening. I have a lot of DNFs and books I did not like on this list. There were a couple of successes in here, but not many. So yeah, I'm gonna get the DNFs out of the way. We're just gonna start right there because I want to get some of these out of the way. I don't want to think about them anymore. The first was Starling House by Alex E. Harrow. I do still have this one because I got it as a book of the month copy and I haven't unhauled it yet, but I DNF'd this at like 53%. I DNF'd. I got over halfway into this book, but this just wasn't the book that I wanted at the time nor expecting. This was pitched as a like haunted house, like kind of eerie sort of story, and it ended up being like fairy tale-esque, like good versus evil, and it just wasn't at all what I wanted, and I, because of that, just got really bored. We're following this really small weird town where the heroine feels completely trapped and she's taking care of her brother who's in high school, and she is desperately trying to get him out of this like backwards small town. And in order to do that, she takes a job at Starling House, which is this supposedly haunted house where a bunch of creepy things happen and everyone avoids, and the family is kind of shrouded in a lot of bad stories, and she learns what is actually going on with Starling House and ends up having a romance with the ward of Starling House, I guess. And it was what it was. It just wasn't what I wanted, and I don't have much else to say about it. Last to Leave the Room by Caitlin Starling, I DNF'd at 43%, and I literally have no idea how to tell you what this book is about because I don't know what the fuck this was. This author and I are clearly not meant to be. I read her debut book and wasn't the biggest fan, and I thought that going in knowing that this was going to be fantastical, I would be like more prepared, but I have no idea what this book was. We're following this woman who works for something. I still don't understand what she was working for, but she's in this like fake city outside of San Francisco, and something about tunnels, and there is a door in her basement that suddenly appeared, and the room is growing, but it's defying science. And look, I got an engineering degree. I took a lot of physics classes. I could not understand what was happening in this book. Like, I just couldn't. I understood the idea that it wasn't following like laws of space, but like eventually a doppelganger, like a clone of her, comes through the door, and the clone is like a really nice version of her, and our heroine totally sucks. She's not going to work and everyone is mad at her because she's obsessed with this door and then obsessed with the clone of her. It was so weird. Like, I literally don't know how to talk about this book because at one point I was just like, what are we doing? Like, I'm not following any of this. Like, I don't understand what we're trying to do here. I don't understand her job. I don't understand. I don't know. I don't even want to think about this book anymore because it was weird and I didn't like it. And then Hallowed by Jessica S. Taylor, I DNF'd at 68%. This was another book for a video. I didn't care. I have no negative feelings towards this, but I could not tell you what this book is really about. I think this one was a sacrifice to the woods, Headless Horseman. He's not actually the Headless Horseman. He's some sort of like devil creature dude, and then they just like fight and plot and then go back to the hotel and talk about what they just did, and then they go back out and they fight and they talk, and then they go back to the hotel and talk about what they did, and I could not care. I could not force myself to care. Those are all the DNFs. And then the one book that I hated was Hollow by C.M. Discosta. I am officially done with this author. I DNF'd 2 of her books in October. One I'm not even going to talk about because like I never posted it as like currently reading or anything like that, but I'm done with CM Disgasta. I think I've DNF'd like 3 of her books now, and then I gave this one 2 stars. I hated this book. Every fiber of my being hates this book. Like, why? This is actually 2 books in one, and the first book I want to bleach out of my brain. Like, if I could unread that first book, I would unread it. It was so... the second one wasn't as bad, but I could not have cared less about it. And I felt so grimy from the first book that I was just like desperately trying to get through it, because at the time I was going to film a video and I forced myself through it and then ended up scrapping the video anyways. So there's 4 of the books we've gotten out of the way. I don't hate anything else on the list. Everything else was just fine or fantastic. So now that we've gotten all the negativity out of the way, first is Grimoire of Grave Fates, which is an anthology kind of story, and I had a really good time with this. I gave it 3.5 stars. It was a very like unique setup. So this is written from, I think it was 18 authors, if I'm remembering correctly. The book is one story, so we're solving one single mystery throughout the book, but every chapter is written by a different author and takes place from a different character at the school, and I thought it was really fun. This is set at this like magical school that floats, and they can take the school and move it around the world. And all of the students there are magical in some way. And one of the professors, who is hated by everybody, ends up dying at the beginning of the book. And you are trying to solve the mystery of who murdered him. And I just thought it was a really, really cool setup. I've never read a book quite like this, where it was one story, but from different authors and POVs. It was like a very cool way to get exposed to different writers' voices, and in a way that gave each of the characters that you read from a very unique voice as well. And so I thought that was all really cool. I liked all of the things that this book had to say. It was very straightforward in its opinions and the things it had to say. This was very, very much so written for teens. And I appreciated that a lot, because a lot of times I'm feeling lately like YA books are being tailored to millennials, and we're 30. So we don't need the YA books tailored to us. YA books need to be tailored to teenagers. That's what they're for. And so I really appreciated how this book felt like it was for a group of 16-year-olds. And I liked all the characters. The one thing with this book that I would say you need to note is that because you have 18 chapters featuring 18 different characters from 18 different authors, you do not ever get to know a character very well. And so if you are a character-driven reader, I think this is going to leave you feeling a little disconnected, because it's so plot-based that you're going to be missing that like emotional connection, because you don't get to know a single character. You are getting like tiny little peeks, 8 to 12 pages from each of these characters. And so I do want to note that, but I had a really good time. I thought it was fun. Then I read Outfield Assist by Kat Giraldo, which I absolutely loved. I was so excited when this book was announced. This is the follow-up to Wild Pitch, which I gave 5 stars earlier this year. And this was everything. It is a polyam relationship between a bi hero, a gay hero, and a bi heroine. Their relationship was done so well. This is very much so a very slice of life story. There again is not a ton of driving plot in this. You are really following these 3 messy main characters as they try and find their happily ever after. The heroine is the athletic trainer for the baseball team from book one. One of the heroes is a baseball player on that team, and the other hero is the son of the owner, who is also a swimmer. Something has happened and his career is kind of over, and he's struggling to find what's next for him. And the three of them end up kind of having to form this team to rehab the baseball player's knee. Along the way, they form this really amazing relationship, and I loved all of them so deeply. They are all very, very flawed main characters. They all have their baggage, and you are just watching them all kind of open up and accept themselves as they are, and not like let society and everyone else's opinion color their feelings and their relationship. And it was really, really lovely. This book is also steamy as hell, and one of the things that I love about Kat Giraldo's books is there is a lot of kink in both this one and in Wild Pitch, and it is actually done very, very well. This book did a really great job of showing the discussions and things that need to be had in order to have that sort of relationship. I loved this book so much. After that was Their Vicious Games by Joelle Wellington, which was probably the biggest surprise of October because I gave this book 5 stars. This is a YA horror book that I devoured. I read this book in a single sitting via audio. I put it in kind of on a whim because I was doing stuff around the house, and I could not stop listening to this book. It was so addictive and bingeable and vicious. This is following our heroine who is graduating high school at the beginning of the book from this extremely wealthy academy where her parents work, and she and her parents are very like middle class, and so everyone that she goes to school with is very privileged and white, and she is not. And something happens, and you don't know at the beginning of the book what it is, but she loses her spot at Yale, and all of the colleges that she was accepted to revoke their acceptance. And she is desperate to find a way to undo it. And the only way she can think of is by entering this competition that the like wealthiest family at like the entire academy puts on. And they are very, very powerful, very, very wealthy, and they can pretty much do whatever if she wins this competition. She ends up getting an invitation, and when she gets there, she learns about what happens and why this competition exists in the first place. And it, in fact, is a very vicious game. And I think what I loved so much about this is, one, the author did a fantastic job with her discussions and the way that she presented them, and then did not hold back at all. No punches were pulled in this book. It goes there, and I loved it. The horror elements in here, just to be clear, because I think sometimes we have this certain idea about what horror is, and then we say, well, this isn't horror because. The horror in this book is the horrific situation. This is not like a jump scare book, but it is the situation that these young women are put in that is horrific. I really recommend this one if you are into like thriller, suspense sort of stories. Like I said, I would call this horror, but not because it's scary, but because of the, like I said, horrific situation that these people are put in, and it was fantastic. After that, I picked up Iris Kelly Doesn't Date by Ashley Herring Blake, which was the third and final book in the Bright Falls series, and I gave this book 3 stars. I loved book 1. Delilah Green was one of my favorite books of the year that I read it, and the sequel and this third book just didn't live up to that first book. I thought this book was very forgettable, in all honesty. It was a little heavy-handed, and I feel very nothing about this book. We're following the last best friend, Iris, who is kind of in and out of relationships through the first 2 books, and after a pretty devastating relationship at the end of book 2, has kind of sworn off love and romance. At the beginning of the book, she meets our other heroine, who is very unsure of herself. She's very, very anxious, and she's just gotten out of a very long-term relationship and doesn't know how to put herself back out there, even though she wants to. And she ends up meeting Iris at a bar, and they have the world's worst one-night stand. And unfortunately, they end up at the same like acting playhouse thing. Our heroine, who's really anxious, is actually an actress and is conned into doing this local community show by her ex-girlfriend, and Iris has decided that she is going to try out for this show, and when they run into each other, they have to fake date. I didn't care about either character, in all honesty. I thought they were terrible communicators. Absolutely terrible communicators. Had terrible friends. Not Iris's friends, like Delilah and Claire. Those two are wonderful. But our other heroines, Stevie's friends, all trash. Throw them in the garbage. Not a single one of them was a good friend. And like everything that they did, I was like, why are we hanging out with them? Get rid of them. We don't need them. I didn't like the breakup. I didn't like the grovel. It was a bummer. I didn't really care for it. The next book I'm going to talk about is The Beautiful by Renee Ahdieh. I'm going to keep this really short because this was a fourth reread. YA, fantasy, paranormal, romance, set in historical New Orleans. Brain glitched. And our heroine goes there to escape her life in France, and she ends up meeting this eerie group of strangers who all seem very suspicious, and people are being murdered. She has a romance with one of them. And I gave it 4 stars again. And then the last book was Charming as Hell by Sarah Blue, which I gave 4.5 stars. I don't know what it is about this series, but I find it completely bingeable and unputdownable, and I eat it up. I had such a good time with this book. This is a why choose polyamorous romance between our heroine, who is the daughter of the devil and has been recently made, which is the first time she's inhabited her own body for a very long time. And she wants to experience all of the sensations. And when she is finally allowed the freedom to roam hell, she ends up going to the torture dungeons, meets the guy that is in charge of that, strikes up a romance with him. The two of them go out to a nightclub and they find another hero, and the two of them strike up a romance with him. And we have a nice little throuple going, but she is also very much so attracted to her father, the devil's right-hand man, who is very uptight and very loyal and very antagonistic, and the two of them fight and bicker over everything because he is a rule follower and he doesn't entirely trust our heroine. They end up eventually all coming together, forming this little happy family. There is plot in here that I don't really want to discuss because the plot is pretty dependent on what has happened in the previous books. So I'm going to leave the description of the plot out, but there is a plot in here. They are trying to uncover some secrets and some information that might help them in their battle with the forever battle with the angels. I'll leave it at that. I think we have one more book left, and I'm very excited for that final book because it's the throuple polyamorous romance that I have been waiting for since book 1. It's a really good time. The series is so addictive, highly entertaining. So that is it for this round of recent reads. This one was pretty quick since I didn't want to linger too long on some of these books. Like I said, unfortunately, I didn't vlog any of these because I wasn't having a good time. October is over, spooky season and I parted ways, not so amicably, and we are on to better things. So let me know if you've read any of these and what your thoughts were on them. Thank you all so much for watching. I will see you in my next video. Bye.